Hello everyone, Krydax here, and welcome to our Season 2 Pyanodon's base tour. We are about 100 hours in, and you can see the spaghetti has grown quite a bit since the beginning, and we're basically going to go through what it looked like from start to now, because we are in the stage of the game where rails are just starting to open up. We've got a lot of new technology available to us, and in many ways, it's kind of when the beginning of the game ends and the real meat of the game begins. And of course, if you were to play it, you might get here sooner than 100 hours or later than 100 hours. There's a lot of choice in a Pyanodon's run, but we're going to walk through where we started, the humble roots of our base. And this was our starting area. It was around this raw coal patch was kind of where we started. I don't think any of the iron patch is left. Or the stone patch. We had an iron stone. There was an aluminum patch here. I think we mined all of that out, but there is a little bit of the raw coal patch left, so we'll walk over there. And, talk about how Pyanodon's starts. You start with not electric miners. You don't get electric miners for a long time, but you start with burner miners and raw coal rather than regular coal, and it produces ash whenever you use it in a burner machine. So that's right, just like you get, what's the vanilla equivalent? I guess nuclear fuel cells leave behind a spent fuel cell. Well, a spent coal is spent raw coal is ash. And so whenever a machine finishes burning an ash, it produces one and you have to deal with it. And it gets everywhere. You end up with thousands, nay, millions of ash in the early game. And you can see here, when you're using a stone furnace, you have to deal with the ash, but you also have to deal with its output. So, I digress. In the very early game, it's just like regular Factorio, any mod, you gotta get more iron, you gotta get copper, you gotta make more plates, and, all that stuff is pretty standard. In Pyanodons, you do have to I think it's 8 iron for every iron plate, so it's pretty slow going. It feels pretty grindy at the beginning, for sure, but, other than that, it's pretty standard. And the first science pack you get is Automation Science still, same name, but obviously the icon's different. They're these little flower planter boxes of these alien flowers, and more or less, it's still just, basic resources, but now the basic resources include ash, soil, stone, wood, iron, and small parts which have copper in them. So it's still iron and copper, but it also includes this native flora, it includes wood and stone, so it's a little bit of everything from the early game. And yeah, once you get that going, you can do a few researches. I believe you research into electricity. I don't think you start with it. And this was our original boiler area. I've since removed a lot of it. You also should know, they're mentioning the efficiency of the boilers. There was a few episodes where I was confused AF about how these work, because they're talking about 3.7 megawatts of consumption, but their steam output doesn't quite line up with the energy density of water. It's a whole thing. I did eventually figure it out, and I've received many comments on YouTube about how wrong I was, even about the right version of it, which is funny because it's like, no, I'm definitely right about it. Once I figured it out, all the numbers clicked together, and it does work. But the bottom line is that you should know water and steam have a different energy density, and that is the core of why I was confused, is I assumed the energy density of each was the same, and that's what screwed me up. Anyway, we're actually using up a lot of our ash that we produced when we were boiling all this. I needed 2 inserters in and 2 inserters out, because that's how fast these boilers would consume the raw coal. And so we ended up with just mountains of ash over here. We're talking like hundreds of thousands. And right now we're using it to fuel our log production. And that makes them go a little bit faster. But I digress. In the early game, you're using a lot of boilers, and you use mechanical inserters nicely. They don't require any power, and they're not burner inserters. So they actually just run on their own forever. They're pretty slow, only 0.6 items per second, but it is nice that they run automatically. So if there's one thing that Pyanodon's gives you that's nice, it's that. The other nice part is they start with a filter, and so you can more easily figure out how to deal with the ash that's everywhere. So you can filter ash one direction and then, you know, filter your plates the other. So this was our early build for iron smelting. We would, you know, have the ash kind of go on an underground to one belt, and then, so that's whitelisting ash, and then this inserter is blacklisting ash, and so it would put, you know, the copper plate or iron plate onto this belt, and that was how I did most of my early game smelting, and it's still doing my iron smelting, weirdly enough, because I haven't gotten a better way to smelt iron yet. So that is the early game of Pyanodons. You make small parts, you need bolts from sticks, you know, a lot of mod stuff. I'm not going to cover every recipe because that would go far beyond the scope of this video, but if you're watching this video, you probably already know Pyanodons has a lot of recipes, and the early game is no stranger to a lot of recipes. You use these little air core inductors as like tier 0 circuits. These are kind of used in lieu of circuits for all the early buildings. You know, even just a steam engine, you need 10 iron plates, 5 pipes, and 8 small parts. But small parts are also not that cheap. Where's my small parts? Small parts are 3 copper cables, an iron gear wheel, and 3 bolts just to make 2 of them. And then you have to make the bolts, which are from sticks, of course, and then sticks, which are from plates. So there's just so many steps to even get... yeah, there's so many steps. But yeah, someone was mentioning you don't get splitters for a long time. So that's another really important part about the Pyanodons early game, is splitters require actual circuits. And those circuits I didn't get until... what's my milestones? I didn't get circuits until about 16 hours into the game. If you rush them, you can get there faster. I was taking it slow, trying to do things fairly clean in the early game, but it's definitely not a fast process. So yeah, circuits require all of this, plus all of this. The early game oil processing is a bit of a pipe nightmare. So you take your coke, or what do you start with? You start with tar, I think, is the first thing that you process. And you steam crack that tar into all sorts of oils and pitch and creosote, and then you can process the pitch into coke, hydrogen, light oil, naphthalene, anthracene. I mean, there's 5 outputs, you know, and this is early game we're talking. Like, this was in the first 10 hours you're dealing with this stuff. And then you can crack those things further into all sorts of stuff. Thankfully, you do get the sinkholes, so you can void extra stuff, which is nice. But yeah, it's kind of a mess. I do use the fluid highlighter mod, or pipe visualizer mod, so that makes it a little easier to see what's connected to what with different networks of fluids. I also recommend the advanced fluid handling mod. It's not available from the start. It does mesh into the tech tree fairly well. I believe there's a patch for the advanced fluid handling, like advanced fluid handling for Pyanodons or something like that. The mod list will be in the description of this video, but yeah, all that to say, you need all of this to get some of the fluids used in these circuits. I don't remember exactly which ones. It's been a while since I set this up, but it's probably the formaldehyde or something. No, that's methane, which is used from moondrops. And that's another thing Pyanodons has going for it, is all of these alien life things, which the early ones are mainly just you get seeds which produce the flowers, and then the flowers produce the seeds, and you have this kind of self-sustaining loop, and then all of the extra can get used to produce something else, which in this case is methane. But it gets more complicated later. You need all sorts of fiber and sap and cellulose and formaldehyde and formica and these printed circuit substrates, and we needed ceramic from clay, and then you make all these little resistors from glass and tin and iron and copper and graphite. Oh my, and once you make all these little parts, then you can combine it all to be a simple circuit board. Now I'm using the second recipe, which uses a higher tier battery, but it's pretty crazy. I still haven't connected the output on the last moondrop. You are completely right about that. Let's go ahead and get this connected. But how? So this is where the fluid highlighting is helpful. So I can kind of try to cut a little spaghetti path through this. And there are these underground T-junctions that you can use, which are super nice. And there we go. Now we've connected our methane here. So yeah, that's the early game in Pyanodon's, and it's pretty crazy. I decided not to go with a bus method because it's just, there's too many items to bus. You just can't do it. And so I decided to kind of just be organic and belt things where they needed to go, and it's resulted in a pretty cool looking base, I think. We do have kind of these pipelines of items where we ended up, I need to ship this item way over here, and so we would try to follow along belts I had already made. And it kind of created these natural highways of belts and sometimes belt spaghetti to get items and ash everywhere. We started routing all of our ash to what I call Ash Mountain, which right now it's only got, I don't know, I guess it's almost full, but at one point it was a little more emptied out. I think I still haven't properly figured out how to deal with all this ash, but yeah, we kind of just kept adding things onto the periphery. Once you start needing Vraux for formic acid, those grow by using flora and cocoons and moss, and so you have to make the cocoons in a Pyanodon's reproductive complex, and then that gets you cocoons, and you know, you have more loops to deal with. So it's pretty crazy what you have to set up. You know, you can see how big these buildings are too. That's something that you have to get used to pretty quick when you start Pyanodon's, is like, oh, these buildings are not 3x3. They are 17 by 17, or how big are these again? I think the reproductive complexes are like 22 by 22. So yeah, they're just massive buildings. Yeah, so you need a lot more belts is kind of one thing you realize, because just to get a belt from one side to the other, you're gonna spend 100 belts, you know, just belting along the front of these buildings. So you really need to mass produce belts, and infrastructure in general in Pyanodon's is more expensive. So where did we go after the first science pack in the first circuit? Well, then once you get the first science pack, you can start to get some other ways to process resources. I think at that point we could do better copper processing and better versions of coal, raw coal to coke. We needed a lot of syngas because there are buildings that require fluid fuel rather than solid fuels. So here we were processing a lot of raw coal into coke and some other fluids. Coal gas is the main one you need here. And then we process that coal into more coal gas and tar, and then we have some coke that we get as a byproduct of that, which I'm using in other parts of the base, but then also turning that into more coal gas if we have extra. And then all of that coal gas gets turned into syngas plus more tar. So that tar that we got from this process is what gets you started on all of the oil processing and cracking of the early game. And that's one of the big things you got to do. From there, let's see, what did we do next? I can't quite remember. Let's look at the milestones and see what happened next. Duralumin is an expensive combination of aluminum and copper that you need to get. Titanium. Plastic's surprisingly easy. You almost kind of get it on accident just with stuff you've already been making. Where's my plastic? It's over here somewhere. Where are you? Here it is. Yeah, it's just syngas and aromatics, and you're already producing aromatics as a byproduct of some of the tar cracking stuff you've done. And you don't need very much plastic early game, so weirdly enough, plastic is almost easy in Pyanodon's, at least in the amounts that you need for the early game. But yeah, one big thing that you need is the antimony, or antimony. I'm still not certain what the right way to pronounce that is in the country I live in, at least. But yeah, you mine this pink stuff, and it needs, again, it needs some sort of fuel. I decided to go with canisters of syngas, so those cycle. The empty ones cycle around and get refilled, and this is connected to my syngas pipeline. And then you have to make antimony oxide, and that's way up here, so you can see I'm just shipping everything all over the world with these belts. and then that gets used to produce the vitrolloy and the iron nexolite antimony special alloy, also known as Phoenix. And those two things combine to make intermetallics. That's kind of the next big milestone, and intermetallics are used in a lot of buildings. And so you basically need intermetallics to be able to produce a lot of the factories. In fact, the actual factories themselves that replace assembling machines use intermetallics. And oh, by the way, even the level 2 are burner. All the assembling machines are burner assembling machines. So if you want to use electricity, you have to use the bigger assembling machines that require intermetallics. Here's my lead processing. Nothing fancy there. It's just turning grade 1 lead. Where's the... Oh, it turns lead ore into grade 1 lead, and then we're turning that into all this grade 1 lead, and then that actually just smelts like normal. But it's slightly more efficient than smelting the regular lead ore. And you'll find that one of the cool things about Pyanodons is all of the ores have multiple processing chains. So if I look at iron plate, weirdly it doesn't show up in the other iron processing, but you can see there's 5 different researches, and each of them will change up what your iron processing chain looks like. You'll get more iron plates at the end out of the same amount of iron ore, but it requires more and more steps. And so it's this really cool trade-off of complexity but efficiency. And often you use less power and less ore for the same amount of plates. Eventually you need to start working towards, what did we do? Logs, chromium, glass processing is a big thing in the early game. The glassworks are some of the most power-hungry buildings. They're like 10 megawatts a piece, and you have to use fluid fuel, so you can't just use a bunch of raw coal for those. So yeah, it's pretty crazy. You know, the numbers you see in the early game are kind of staggering sometimes, but after a while you get used to it. Here's our tin processing. We had to get fish at some point. Again, I don't remember why. Oh, we needed fish oil. That's what it was. So we needed fish oil. So this is kind of similar to how flowers work. You know, you get the eggs and then make the thing, but instead of flowers, they're fish. And then those are getting shipped down here for fish processing. And here's where we store all the different animal parts. You get lard, chitin, brains. This one's meat, but it's empty. Skin, guts. I think this one's bones, but we don't often have very many bones. So, yeah, there's a lot of animal parts that you get to deal with. And then eventually you start working towards making the cDNA stuff, which is really complicated. I mean, look at that. How many ingredients is that? 8 ingredients, and each of those ingredients is fairly complicated. Like the laboratory instruments require a bunch of different things. Rubber's really expensive in the early game. You need circuits and this Phoenix stuff and tin. You need lots of these petri dishes. So it's really a lot. You know, we're talking 100 hours here, and I just recently got to logistics science at 82 hours, which is only the 3rd science pack. I skipped over PyScience 1, which is not too long after you get circuits. You get PyScience 1, and that unlocks a few more researches, but not like a whole new wave of researches. The whole new wave gets unlocked when you get logistics science pack. That's when you get rails, and you know, you can do circuits. Big power poles are like the next thing in the tech tree for me that I haven't quite researched, but we're basically there. You get all sorts of stuff once you get logistics science. So yeah, we spent a while planning out the rail network. I'm a little sad we didn't get to use it quite as much, but it is pretty nice. I designed a system that uses LTN, and the idea, it also uses these merged chests. So you essentially merge a section of chests into one warehouse. Pretty cool. But yeah, you've got requesters and providers with LTN, just like you have with your logistics bots. And the idea here is that we're using 1-1 trains, and no more than 2 trains can ever be at one stop. So I don't have to worry about needing a train stacker, because there's always room at the destination. Trains are never going to be going to a stop where it won't be able to fit. So I actually have the connection that goes into all the train stops right off of my intersection. And I have this blueprint book, which is all lined up. And so I don't have to worry about it not lining up with my other train pieces. So I can just copy and paste these wherever I want, and I can add more stations if I need them or subtract them. And I have a T-shape junction that I can use so we can make blocks that are bigger. I started with just square blocks because these are pretty big. I think they're like, what's the size? 150 or no, 240 by 240. So they're pretty big. I almost went bigger than that even because Pyanodon's is just crazy. But this is a pretty big block. And if I needed one, I could just make like, you know, a couple T-junctions that are back to back like that. And then I could have a larger area. So that was the rail network. It took a while to figure out how to get the roboports placed. Oh, and by the way, robots. When did I get robots? It was not very fast. You play a lot of the game before you get robots. Does it show up in here somewhere? Yeah, 65 hours to construction bots. And it was 46 hours to rails, pretty much. Maybe a little bit less. 54 hours to our first locomotive. I mean, you play for a long time without any of those things. But it's been really fun. So I've kind of talked about the base a little bit. I want to talk about Pyanodons a little bit. If you're watching this and you're wondering, should I play Pyanodons? The short answer is maybe. You know, I can't just say yes or no. I like it a lot. And if this looks fun and interesting to you, and you're not scared of taking it slow and being on a long journey, then I would say, yeah, try it out. You'll know in the first 20 hours if you like it or not. It does grow on you once you're able to do a few more things, and it is a little grindier in the early game than maybe it should be. But I think they've improved a lot of those things in the last few big updates that they've done. And I do think the first 10 or 20 hours is pretty indicative of what the mod pack feels like. So if you like the first 10 or 20 hours, you'll probably continue liking it. It is pretty crazy what you have to do, but as long as you can keep your head down and focus on, I'm just going to do this next thing. I'm just going to set up this one line of production. I'm just going to set up that one thing. Then you're going to get there eventually. And if you just start out thinking, oh, I want to get to circuits. I can't wait till I get to circuits. Well, you're going to have a bad time because it's 10 hours away, you know, from wherever you are at the beginning. So it really, you have to be able to just enjoy the process of whatever it is you're doing right here and now. And if you feel like you can do that pretty well, then I would say give it a try if this looks fun. First of all, the art is amazing. Where's my button to turn off alt mode? The art of the Pyanodon's buildings is just incredible. I mean, you can just watch these machines run. You know, there's so much detail. Like, oh, it's like literally sorting out the sand and rocks, and you know, these oxygen furnaces are got these glowing bits and the steam coming out the top, and you know, the fish farms have fish swimming around in them. It's so cool. I could look at a lot of these buildings just forever. Okay, not forever, but for a while. You know, the smelters look really neat. You got molten metals moving around. Let's see, what other buildings are there? Oh yeah, I've always liked the seaweed crop facilities because you got these little robots running around collecting the seaweed. I think they look really cute. Here's the tar facility, destructive distillation column, all sorts of stuff. But yeah, Pyanodon's is about the journey, not the destination. Certainly true. I mean, look at that. That's so cool. Like, what are these things? I don't know. But they're like popping up and then popping down and the little hatches close. It's so neat. So neat. The tree collecting. There's like a little robot with saws for hands. It's so cool. They like come out and carry wood back. That's just really cool. The reproductive complex plays jazz music. I don't know if it'll play since it's not running right now, but it's pretty great. Pretty freaking great. What else do I have to say about Pyanodons? I don't know. I highly recommend it. It's a well done mod. It has been improved a lot in the last 2 or 3 years. I mean, it's been improved for a lot longer than that, but I think a lot of people got scared of it a few years ago, and I think it's in a better spot now. It's been balanced better. A lot of the janky bits have been tweaked and tuned and refined, and it plays a lot more cleanly from a game design perspective and from a tech tree perspective. So I would actually recommend, I wouldn't have done this before, but now I would recommend, if you're interested in Pyanodons, try it out. And I think you will find out for yourself pretty quick if it'll be fun. Whereas before, I think Pyanodons was in this weird place where the early game was so much worse that players would get turned off, even though they might have enjoyed it if they had gotten a little further. But I think it's in a really good spot now. So I would recommend it. Pyanodons is really awesome. 100 hours can get you to something approximating this. Maybe more if you're faster than me. I'm not that fast of a player, especially in this playthrough. I was trying to take my time. But you can see how many different types of ore there are, too. It's just crazy. You do get these cool power generation systems in the alternative energy mod, which was the most recent mod to be added to the Pi suite. And basically it melts down this molten salt and then it heats it up using, you know, whatever fuel you've got available. And then you use that with pressurized water to make this high pressure steam. And then that runs a high pressure turbine. And that thing can generate up to, what, 473 megawatts? So that's pretty great. And you need that power. I mean, my base isn't even that big, and it's already running at 400 megawatts steady. Maybe 350. But, yeah, it's pretty crazy. If you're curious about the mod list I've been using, because I use a lot of quality of life mods in addition to the Pyanodons suite, you can check out my mod list in the description. There might be a couple that are left out because I added them since the run started. So if you're curious about something, feel free to ping me on the Discord or in a YouTube comment or whatever, and I'll try to get back to you. But yeah, I don't even know what else to say. It's been a wild ride. If you're curious about why this is the finale and I'm ending, it's because I'm taking a break from Factorio before Space Age comes out. I wanted to make sure that I am fresh and not burnt out at all and totally ready to go when Space Age releases in October, and so I'm super excited about that. So I just wanted to take a break. I am going to keep streaming on Thursdays at 4 p.m. And as far as what games I'll be streaming, I haven't fully decided yet. It might switch around a little bit, but should be something that most of you are interested in most of the time. You're right, Sugnum, I didn't talk about caravans. These are basically the earliest form of transportation you get that isn't belts. And they can carry stuff from one location to another. They're pretty decent, actually. It's how I was moving my aluminum ore from over here all the way to over here somewhere. I don't remember where the destination is, but they're pretty nice if you don't want to do super long belts. They're pretty easy to program, and you just have to feed them. That's why my meat keeps disappearing. Or the brains, sorry. They get fed on brains, I think. The meat is for feeding the adorable little Digosauruses, which I also haven't shown you. Look at them go. They dig up Nexalit ore for you. They're so cute. And they run faster on concrete, which is why there's concrete here. So I recommend that. But yeah, they need meat to run, so it's a fun idea, you know, you're using meat as fuel and all sorts of things. So yeah, if you have any questions, let me know in the comments. And this is 100 hours of Pyanodons. Thanks for watching. If you guys would like to see the full run, it's all here on YouTube, all 70 whatever episodes. Almost every minute of gameplay is here on YouTube, so feel free to check that out or go play Pyanodons yourself. Thanks for watching and leave a comment. I'll see you guys in the next one.